I could never, in my wildest nightmares, have ever imagined the horrors that could plague even the most simple of life's enjoyments. The darkness that could invade any world, whether it be real or fictional. It all started the day me and my girlfriend were talking about video games we used to play growing up, and games that we used to enjoy. Over the years of my childhood, I have collected several games pertaining to several different consoles, but we both found the topic of the Nintendo 64 to be the most fun. So that day, we decided to pick up one from my uncle's video game store, and perhaps even pick up one of the great... Wait a minute, who owns a video games store? It's gonna be GameStop. Your uncle's... What are you running out of his shed? Okay, sorry. And perhaps even pick up one of the greatest Nintendo 64 titles, Super Mario 64. Now, when we got there, it took some time and a lot of browsing, but we were able to find the game after about an hour or so in several bins he had placed throughout the store, because that's what you do when you own a store that's selling Nintendo 64 games almost 20 years after the Nintendo 64 came out. Anyway, okay, the only copy he had, it appeared. What? As well as that, we had found an N64, the very last one that he had in stock, ironically. And the best part about it was, he gave it to us for free. Considering he's probably not a taxpayer and not running a legitimate business, I think maybe this wasn't a store. He told me that it had been bought and returned nearly 15 times since it came into his possession, and now he was just looking to get rid of it. He also told me that, ironically, the game was always returned with it as well, as they always seemed to be bought together. He had heard that something was wrong with one or the other, and that some people even went as far as to tell him that they were evil, made in hell, things like that. Alright, that last paragraph, there's so many things wrong with it. Seeing as how he had only heard the story from 3 out of 15 customers. How oddly specific. I brushed it off as just some hysterical story told by people who decided they simply didn't want to keep the system. An excuse, if you will, and gave him $20 for Super Mario 64. Cheap jerk gave me the N64 for free, though. Wait, what? He's a cheap jerk, and he sells you a Nintendo 64 console and Super Mario 64 for $20. That would have cost about, I don't know, something like $260, almost $300 back in the day. You ungrateful little prick. We went back home after being gone for about an hour and a half. When I got home, I laid the system by my living room TV and started to rummage through old boxes where I kept all sorts of old games, ranging from classic Atari games to the ever-popular Dreamcast. Is that supposed to be irony? Because the Dreamcast was so unpopular that it essentially failed, and Sega never released another system. Anyway, I give up. It was actually sort of strange, because in these boxes I found that I owned every major console except for an N64. Well, until now, anyways. I pulled out my box with all of the N64 games in it and began to dig through it. I found games like The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, as well as its sequel, Majora's Mask, and 2 Castlevania titles for the system itself, Castlevania 64/Legacy of Darkness. Actually, those 2 games are basically identical, but maybe I'll explain that one day. And so on. Then it was time to hook it up. After everything was set up, my girlfriend decided that, holy fuck, it is taking a long time to get to this fucking game. After some effort, the game was ready to go. "It's me, Mario!" it called out in its upbeat pitch. My girlfriend I don't think that's how the game... Is that how it started? I don't remember. My girlfriend decided to mess with Mario's face a bit before finally pressing start on her purple controller, and the screen transitioned to the file select screen. There were some files already on the game. In fact, all 4 slots were filled, each having just started the game because there were no stars on any file. So we started deleting them. After we deleted one, however, I think it just stays on new unless you get enough stars to continue the game. Anyway, I don't even care. Yeah, that's wrong. After we deleted one file, however, the game froze, and there was a deafening screech coming from our TV speakers, and it sounded almost as if someone was screaming from the game itself. Creepypasta cliche number 1, random screaming. My girlfriend turned off the system after about 5 seconds. After a moment or so, she flipped it back on, and we went back to the file select screen. Strangely enough, the file that we had deleted on file 1 was back, and this time it had 66 stars. Okay, the number 66, creepypasta cliche number 2, even though it previously had none. So once more she deleted it, and again it made a loud screeching sound. Jesus Christ, woman, the thing is alive! This time, I swear to God, it was louder than before, because that's what matters. To the point where we both fell back while covering our ears. As I was closer to the plug than the system itself, I jerked it out of the wall. I don't know what that means. This time, before we bothered trying, you know what I learned is that when something doesn't make sense in these stories, don't try to make sense of it. This time, before we bothered trying, I took the game out of the system and took it into the kitchen. It turned out that it was really dusty. Oh, well, that explains the screaming. Which explained, at least to me, why the game was reacting the way it was. Oh, it was screaming. That's because there was just a little bit too much dust in the console. Every time your video game console screams at you. Although it was still weird. Yeah, I'd say so. After cleaning it up with a Q-tip, I don't think that's how you're supposed to clean it. Like a Q-tip? Why? I took it back into the living room. I handed it to her. She plugged the console back into the wall and we were ready to go. Actually, I think a Q-tip with alcohol does work on discs. By now it was getting dark out. There was no light in the room, and we couldn't plug in our lamp because the system and TV took up the outlet. So we were forced to play in the dark. Or we could be in the ownership of a fucking power strip. For me, something didn't feel right, because for some reason I was filled with a sense of nervousness that I could not quite explain. I shook it off and turned off the system. When we were back to the file select screen, each file that was there previously was gone, oddly enough, which to me confirmed my suspicion that this is really hard to read, it was just a dirty game messing up. So we started a new game on file 1 and the screen lagged like it were a CD or something, but after about a minute started up normally. We got to the opening scene with Peach inviting Mario to the castle, and the camera, as usual, followed up the pathway to the giant green pipe which Mario leaped out of. She was in control of the game and took Mario directly to the castle. When she opened the door to the castle, there was a prolonged pause which made me nervous. Once again, the loud screeching that ruined our game previously shot through our ears, and it felt like glass was jabbed into my eardrums. We were both overwhelmed because of the terrible screaming and could not even think to reach to the system to the plug. What? Reach to the system to the plug? What the fuck does that mean? And, I mean, why didn't you just think to just turn the console off or reset it or maybe continue listening to the fucking screaming? After about 30 seconds, it stopped and we looked up to the TV. Mario had somehow found his way to Big Boo's haunt, as the mansion that had never appeared this creepy when I used to play it loomed over Mario's head ominously. "What the hell?" I said to myself. I said as I regained myself. What the hell does that mean? My girlfriend was still getting herself together, and it took her a minute to process what was going on. I took the controller now and took a good look at the mansion itself. It was nothing like it was supposed to be. It had castle-like features, actually, and it was totally covered in blood and rust. The sky had black and red colors about it, complemented by the black clouds that seemed to pass by in an instant. Okay, now he sounds like he's writing a description of a Starbucks coffee drink. I noticed that a new tower was now coming out of the mansion, and upon getting a good look at it, I noticed several figures hanging from it. The whole screen faded to white like it does in the entrance room when you look up at the skylight and go to the world that you obtain the wing cap in. When Mario reappeared, he had somehow made it on top of the tower on a platform that went all the way around. The sky had a gloomy look to it as each cloud passed over the tower, as dark as the night sky, and lightning began to rule the sky and illuminate the clouds in its thunderous wake. I tried for the first time to move Mario forward, but a bolt of lightning stopped any movement that I was willing to make at the moment. I dropped the controller. My heart began to race. I didn't know what to expect, and I could see by the look in my girlfriend's eyes that a strong sense of paranoia had overcome her, because I was constantly noticed her looking back behind us in the shadows that covered the room. That's not my mistake. With hesitation, I took the controller in hand and moved Mario forward about a foot or so before something fell from the top of the screen and the camera zoomed in on it. It was a depiction of Mario, with a noose around his neck. We both yelled out, and I dropped the controller on the floor. I moved back as quickly as possible. Mario's clothes were ripped all over, exposing several parts of his body. Underneath the clothes, we could make out stab wounds from either a knife or a dagger, which, Jesus Christ, more than likely caused the blood splatter all over his skin and remaining clothing. But the most grotesque part of the image were his eyelids and mouth, sewn shut, with blood trickling down his cheeks and chin. Okay, did he hang himself? Did he get stabbed? Did he get into a weird sewing accident? I don't understand. What is the purpose of the noose if he's been stabbed? If you've been stabbed, you're as good as... Okay, whatever. I was appalled at the gruesome sight. My heart was racing, and I would swear to this day that at the moment the dead Mario fell from the top of the screen that I had heard something run into my bedroom. All of the hung figures were of Mario, all the exact same, with eyelids and mouths sewn shut and stab wounds all over their bodies. I worked up all the courage I could muster. I again unplugged the N64, which turned off, but not at that instant. Before the TV screen went black, the hung Mario's face under his sewn lips was smirking at us. Because that's what you do when you've been stabbed and hung. You smirk. Not smile, but smirk. I didn't want to get up, not even to turn on the lights. I wanted to remain in that exact spot sitting down, because at least there I felt somewhat safe. But for my girlfriend's sake, I plugged in the lamp and lit the room up. Okay. Everything was peaceful, perhaps a calm after the storm, and I took a deep breath and sat back down. I couldn't get that image out of my head, that smirk. I felt powerless as to what my mind wanted to remain on. I sat on the floor next to my girlfriend and hugged her, picked her up and took her to bed. Who in the hell would make a game like that? It had to be the game. It had to be hacked. It's the only thing that made any sense to me. What I saw in that game, I would define as evil in its sickest form. Without a word between us, we laid in bed for what felt like hours before one of us finally broke the silence. I don't think you have a girlfriend. Enjoy your hand. She told me that she wanted to get rid of that game as soon as possible. As it was already late, I decided that it would be best to wait until tomorrow, because I was sure that my uncle's store was closed and GameStop doesn't take games that old. Dude, nobody takes games that old. So we stayed in bed and agreed that we would not play the game again. Okay, I need a breather for a second. Okay. But I couldn't get it out of my head still. I wanted to know why or how this was done. Because those are your two options in this case. Either you return the game or you continue playing it, I guess. I don't understand where this... My curiosity got the better of me in the end, and after she had fallen asleep, I quietly got out of bed, went back into the living room, plugged in the N64, and didn't turn it on. Didn't have to. The game started itself. And not only that, picked up exactly where I had left it off. I was astounded by this because I had never seen the Nintendo 64 do anything like that. Right then and there, I knew that there was more to this than I knew and had to know what it was. I was fascinated. Semicolon. Drawn in, perhaps. I got a good look around the tower. Despite being disgusted, I was morbidly fascinated by the entire scene. The paranoia it could convey was intriguing. After a few minutes of looking around, I pressed the pause button and again the screen faded. This time to black. It took me all the way back to the file select screen and I found myself with more questions than answers. All the files were back. Again. File 1 had 66 stars, while files 2, 3, and 4 had none. I tried to remember back to when we picked the file, and I was certain that they were not there before. I tried loading the file 4 first, and in response the game showed me a picture of Mario dead in a pool of his own blood with his eyeballs and entrails hanging out after a shutter. It allowed me to hit B and go back. I tried loading file 3, and again I got another appalling picture. It was Mario once again staring directly into the screen with bloodshot eyes that looked so close to real I really thought that they were real eyes. His mouth was gaping open and his tongue missing. Well, it was missing, from his mouth at least. I examined further and realized that Mario's tongue was wrapped around his throat and that he was being strangled with it, which doesn't make any sense at all. That's just my line. But really, it doesn't make any fucking sense. I heard a chuckle of sorts, not from the game, but it sounded like it was directly behind me. I ignored it against my better judgment, because it couldn't very well be this supposed female that's in my house. I tried to start up file 2 now, and a video game began to play. Mario was strapped down on a table in a decrepit version of the castle's entrance hall. The stones were all black, blood oozing from the cracks between each of them. Curtains that hung from the ceiling were tattered and falling apart. They appeared to be worn with the years. In the background, Peach and Toadstool were strapped to both sides of the door that led to the basement area. Toadstool had the mushroom on his head torn off. I could make out the skull showing through the still fresh wound. He was obviously dead. Peach sent me into a state of awe. Her skin was peeled off, and all I could see fully formed was her head, which remained untouched. Jesus Christ, I said silently, as the video continued. Mario struggled for freedom. As the door upstairs opened and black mass slowly came through, its footsteps solemnly echoed through the silent hall. Oh, a black mass, okay. The currents on the ceiling blew casually to its passing as it moved down the steps toward him. Mario pulled and pulled, but found no way to escape the situation that he had found himself in. And in response, he began to beg for his life and pray, despite the fact that Nintendo has a serious thing about not putting religious elements into its games. The black mass inched ever closer to the hero, It seemed as though Mario gave up. The black mass walked around the table and stopped directly in front of Mario. Again, the hero begged, pleaded for his life. He told the black mass that he would do anything, only spare him for any crime he had committed against it. I saw a tear roll down Mario's cheek, and he closed his eyes tightly. What the fuck did Mario do? He has a lot of character development here. A rope tied around his neck, he gagged and took it. Okay, this is a 64-bit console. I find it hard to believe all this is happening on a 64-bit. A rope tied around his neck, he gagged and took in only heavy breaths. I couldn't see a hand so much as touch the rope or where it even came from, but it was indeed there with just enough slack so that Mario could breath. I have no idea what that means. Deep lacerations cut through Mario's clothes, and blood by the gallons covered his hem in a crimson pool. He screamed, begged, pleaded, asked for death, but it was not given to him. Not yet, anyways. The cuts continued until the floor was covered in the dark red liquid exuding slowly to the floor. Finally, the swipes and stabs ceased altogether, and there was a deep, methodical silence that only Mario's gasps of misery filled. Before I could so much as think on what I had just seen, his eyes and mouth were forced shut, and I could see it for myself, a black needle going through both of his eyelids and his mouth simultaneously, effectively silencing him other than his muffled screams. Even more blood came from the flesh. Alright, this is just like some weird snuff thing. This is like snuff porn involving Mario. Not feeling this. Even more blood came from the fresh wounds and covered up his face. The rope tightened around Mario's neck, although he made no effort to escape. It was over. After a few short grunts, Mario was silent altogether, with no so much as a breath or a movement. His face was terror personified, and even though this is a video game, the pain one would have had to endure, the torture, my God. Again, before the screen faded to black, that Mario smirked at me. I sat in silence as the title screen with Mario's head came up on screen. Only, it wasn't the same Mario. The background was all black, and the Mario was the same Mario from the scene that I had just watched. He had that smirk still on. After much debate, I decided to keep going. I went to the file select screen, and with all my courage that my heart could muster, I loaded file 1, 66 stars. The game loaded to a demonic laugh in a sky filled with blood-red clouds. Repeatedly, I could hear a dark, brooding voice saying, "Game over," like Mario would say after you lost all your lives. The Mario that I was controlling was the same Mario that I had seen killed and on the title select screen. Screams, torment, bodies littered the pathways to the castle, the bodies of Peach, several toadstools, and at the end, the dead Bowser, whose head was missing and whose body was impaled on a spike right outside of the bridge. The kid that wrote this had issues. I entered the castle and found myself back at Big Boo's haunt. I didn't question anymore. I just went with it. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I'm with the author here. I don't question anymore. I just kind of go with it. The scene had not changed, not even slightly. And ignoring all of the graphic details, I entered the mansion to what I was sure would strike my heart in some way, shape, or form. I could feel something. Something circling and enclosing around me. I ignored it. I had to. I needed to know what this was, or what was going on. Something whispered in my ear, I was sure of it. I gulped as the screen transitioned to the entrance of Big Boo's haunt, the room with all the doors. The bodies of faceless Marios were hung all over the ceiling, illuminated only by torches. Okay, faceless Marios. I could feel sweat trickling down the back of my neck as I saw a standalone figure all the way on the upper balcony. I moved Mario slowly towards it. I was afraid, I'm more than willing to admit, and have never been more afraid in my life of a Nintendo 64 game. I jumped up the steps one at a time, moving cautiously and carefully. It was another hung man, that was for certain, but who it was I'll never forget. As I reached the body, I hesitated. All right, wait, let me guess. It's either going to be him, his uncle, Mario, his girlfriend, who may or may not exist, or just something completely irrelevant. I began to tremble, my hands barely holding the controller. The figure was indeed a man hung by a rope. That man had his eyes and mouth sewn shut, just like Mario, and was bleeding profusely from his eye sockets. That man, in all of his pain, was me! Okay, I guessed it, so it's not really that impressive, but okay. He let out a scream, something haunting and bone-chilling, a wail like nothing that I had ever heard. The screen began to flicker and turn to static. I tried to turn off the system. I tried to unplug it. Nothing worked. The TV wouldn't even turn off. I saw my corpse through the static, burning as its haunting wail had yet to cease. Mario turned his head 180 degrees and looked at the screen, and with a smirk on his face, let out a wail just like I did. My head began to hurt and throb. I fell to the floor, and the last thing that I remember from that night was seeing a black mass hovering over me. So my interpretation of this story is that his uncle just molested him in his garage. I really have no way of interpreting this. Let me give it a rating here. Okay, believability. I give this a 2 out of 10 because there was nothing believable about this story. Even the setup had no believability. Scariness, I don't know, maybe like 5 out of 10. It was kind of, the imagery was creepy, but it was kind of just, it could have been imagery to any, it wasn't specific enough to be that. So I give it a 5. I mean, blood and sewn, lips sewn, blah, blah, yeah, who cares? Has to have some context. Overall, I give this a 4 out of 10. It had some funny parts, but it's not trolly enough to be a troll pasta, so it's pretty much just a really not even mediocre, but just a bad, overlong creepypasta. And the reveal at the end was completely unnecessary because, well, for 2 reasons. First, it didn't even need to be there because it was the narrator. Nobody cares about the narrator. So, I mean, to the author of this story, when you're writing a story, you want to think about what the reader is thinking about the protagonist. You don't want to care about, we don't care about you, I guess is a way to phrase it. The other thing is that it's just not a good twist. It's a crappy twist, which I guessed because it was so crappy. If it was his uncle, it would have been a better twist. I would have vastly preferred that it was his uncle because then it would, pull back some level of context. But anyway, there you go.